Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we provide thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you. Because if you're listening to this broadcast, you probably are a wholesale change agent. My name's Ian Heller. I'm accompanied this morning, as always, by my business partner, the co-founder and co-owner, along with me, of Distribution Strategy Group, Dr. Jonathan Bein, the handsome doctor of distribution. How are you today, Jonathan?
I'm just enormously flattered. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're also accompanied by our guest, Frank Hurtte. Frank, how are you today, sir?
I am doing wonderful. It's a beautiful day in Iowa.
Good. Well, it's good to have you here. And I still remember from Field of Dreams that, the spirits mistook Iowa for heaven. So glad you're enjoying it.
I am.
Good. Okay. So, Wholesale Change is brought to you by Epicor. So we want to thank them because for nearly 50 years, Epicor has helped distributors stay ahead of the game with flexible, powerful solutions designed to increase sales, streamline operations, and improve customer experience. Epicor's industry-leading distribution ERP solutions are built specifically to meet the unique needs of wholesalers with everything needed to grow your sales, profits, and productivity while distancing yourself from your competition. Epicor is focused on the things that matter to you: work queues, PO variance queues, kitting, assembly, and production orders, advanced inventory forecasting, VMI, and special project pricing. They build their software using industry best practices and 50 years of distribution experience. But Epicor solutions are far more than just tools for picking and packing and shipping. Fully cloud-based with a modern UI, Epicor offers complete, robust e-commerce solutions, powerful BI and analytical tools, modern API and EDI, value-added services, WMS, virtual assistants, and much more. You can learn about how Epicor helps thousands of wholesalers succeed by visiting epicor.com. So let's get into the heart of the matter and introduce our guest, Frank Hurtte. So Frank, you have an impressive background in distribution, and we're going to talk primarily today about fee-based services and why they're important and how to do them. And you wrote the book on the subject, but before we get into that, why don't you give us a little background on your experience and walk through some of these bullet points here. Sounds like you actually grew up in the family wholesale tires business.
I did. My father was a distributor, took great pride in being a distributor in an industry that really no longer exists today, called tires, batteries, and accessories. We had a couple of different instances, and one of which is I started working there when I was old enough to come to work with him because they had a pop machine and I had the key to it, so I could drink all the Cokes and Pepsis that I wanted.
Right.
But anyway, he had a salesperson who had a gallbladder deal, and back in those days, it was a major deal. He wanted to cover for the salesperson. There was just no one that knew the product, knew the tires, knew what to do. So I ended up riding around with a guy that drove me, and we visited, garages, gas stations, farm places, and it was my job to go in and introduce them to the tires we had, and the strange part is I'm riding with a guy that was just probably like 25, and every time we went somewhere, people would look to him and he'd point and go, "No, he's the guy that's he's the one to talk to." And after they got over the fact that they were talking to a kid that wasn't old enough to drive, we did business, and it was a cool thing.
Cool. Okay. So you grew up in distribution, and then you went to the University of Illinois.
I did. And out of school, I met up with a company, Allen Bradley. Back then it was a privately held company. I liked them because of the fact that they did business through distribution, and I kind of liked the distribution part of it. My first job was to represent them, and I had a number of distributors that I worked with, and I guess I'm happy to say that it grew the business 100% through distribution, and it's fun to work for one of those distributors. And my partners and I had a very good run for 14 years. We grew the business quite rapidly, and in 2005, sold to the employees. And I decided to start River Heights Consulting after that. Along the way, I was the president of the Association for High Technology Distribution, which is a fabulous organization that represents a lot of the automation distributors in the U.S.
Fantastic. Good. And so what we're going to talk about today primarily, by the way, we've already had someone from a leading distributor say, "We love Frank" in chat. So
holy cow.
You've got fans here. I'm not sure what that cost you, but just so you know, it's
had no idea that my brother was listening in. So
yeah, right. Well, it's working already, right? So let's turn off the slides for a little bit because we like to just talk on this show, Frank. And so I read the Distributors Fee-Based Services Manifesto. So we write on services, and I was looking around for some material, and here I found this book on Amazon with the title. I mean, the manifesto is pretty strong, and I want to talk to you about that, but this was exactly what I was trying to find. It was some expert material on why distributors should be charging for their services. And here was the definitive textbook. It's easy to read. It's not huge, but it's the definitive work on distributor services. So, why did you write this book? And can you summarize for us sort of the thinking that you put forward in it?
Yeah, of course. First of all, it is a manifesto. It is not a how-to. It is a why you need to do it or you're going to go out of business book.
Right.
And I wrote it because I felt strongly about the topic. I just kept running into situation after situation of people giving away value, and oftentimes giving it to exactly the wrong kind of people. In my mind, we as distributors face a tsunami of change. It's like a tidal wave sweeping over us, and I'll just kind of go through some of those things. First of all, we got Amazon or Amazon-like companies. The one thing that they cannot provide is service. So they're going to drive down the margins. They're going to impact everything about how we do business in terms of product availability and all of those things. And so we have to do something to build a fence around our business that protects us. And some people call it a moat or a fence or a wall. We won't get into all those different terminologies, but we're going to build something around our business that protects us. The second thing of it is that aside from the margin thing, the products that we sell are becoming cheaper and cheaper in terms of real dollars. If you look at some of the products we sell today and then go back, and especially in my lifetime in working with electronics and electronic automation products, the exact product that I sold back, in the 1980s that cost $25,000 or $30,000, today you can get for $500. In some instances, the drop is even less, but you can trace that into other products, and just overall, the things that we sell are becoming a better value for our customers, and in real dollars, cheaper than they were when I started my career. That's the second thing. The third thing is that products last longer. And so we had situations of, okay, we're selling a product, and in the old days, the product's life expectancy might be 3 years or might be 5 years or whatever. Nowadays, there are products that are coming out that have warranties of 2 years or 3 years. There's a reason for that, and manufacturers don't just give away warranties. What they've done is they've looked and said, these products just don't fail. For distributors, that failure means additional sales. So we're not gonna be able to do anything like that. And and the other part of it is that the people. This is true confessions. If I take my starting pay as an engineer out of school, as a computer engineer, and back in 1970 something, and I won't disclose it. No, I will. It's 1977 when I graduated. If I adjust that according to inflation, I would have started, this year at somewhere in the neighborhood of 45,000. The truth is that engineers today are starting out of school at 65 to 70. So technical people with know-how, it doesn't matter what kind of technical know-how it is, are becoming more and more costly to the distributor. So we got lower margin products that last longer. We've got all of these things and higher wages, and the people that are delivering these services tend to be very highly paid. We have to do something. The model that we have, and I'll go back and maybe even plug somebody else's book. Distributors were all pretty much the same until 1980. And that's what we had: local inventory, we had local service, we had relationships with our customers and everything. And along the way, a guy wrote a book called Value Added Selling. I remember it. I remember seeing it the first time on one of my distributor president shelves and asking him what this meant. And he said, well, here's the deal, Frank. If we provide some services to our customers, it will make us competitor proof. And, every distributor on the planet read that book, or those that didn't were influenced by people that did read it. And so it became a value added war. Oh, we provide free delivery. Great. Okay, well, I'll provide free delivery and I'll take it out of the I'll come and do. I mean, it was almost down in some instances where we were helping them install it, and the whole model worked on our gross margin. But as we know, customers sometimes don't value that, and they certainly don't value it the way it is.
Well, I mean, they particularly aren't going to be willing to pay for it if they can get it for free from numerous competitors, right? So this becomes an industry problem, because if everybody's doing a service for free, that is just an entitlement, right? So you just expect to get it, and it's hard to charge for it. So, and I think in John Schweig, who's a friend of ours who was at Grainger for a long time with me, he talks about value-added services as sort of the worst of all worlds, because sales reps are typically, most sales reps are only paid on gross margin dollars, right? They're not paid on any cost they incur in the into the distributor. So they give away value-added services like candy, to use his terminology, because it doesn't affect their compensation, but it helps them get more gross margin dollars, but it also drives cost in the organization. So there's no disincentive for them to promise every service to every customer. But the distributor's not monetizing those services, right? So you have these increasing SG&A costs that are coming from sales reps giving away more and more, creating more and more demand for these services. And it means that for most distributors, their highest value added services or highest value added customers are also their highest cost to serve and their lowest gross margin.
I think that's the case. I think sometimes, and here's the other part of it. Along the way, some of our salespeople, and this isn't just outside salespeople, inside salespeople too, have developed this machismo on service. I'm going to give you this service whether you want it or not. And in some of our research, we actually took the time to visit customers, and one customer said, "Hey, gee whiz, our biggest complaint about your client, Frank, is the fact that they ship us stuff every day." And I go, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "They don't seem to understand that if they ship something to us before we need it, it costs us more money than if they shipped it all at once." And so we go back and trace into how did this happen. It was because inside sales team said, "Okay, we got it. They ordered it. We're shipping it out today," without ever asking the customer, "Okay, when do you need it?" Taking that shipping from a once a week down to, or once a day down to a once a week thing made a tremendous savings for the distributor, and the customer was completely happy with it.
Right.
and along the way, for outside salespeople, your comment reminds me of a story. I was challenged by a client to do a presentation for their team, and they said, we don't want to do death by PowerPoint. We want a conversation. I did a half a day meeting that was made up of only questions. Every PowerPoint slide just had a question on it. And one of the questions was, okay, do you have people that provide services to customers? Yes, we do. Okay, tell me about it. So we talked about it and talked about all the engineers and the technical people and all the resources they had. And I said, okay, does anybody know how much that cost? And so after a 10-minute conversation, they came up and said, well, this is how much this cost us. I go, do your salespeople know that? And the answer was probably not. And then I said, okay, who controls it? And this was the part that just blew me away. And over the course of time, I've found this same thing to be true at dozens and dozens of distributors. And that's the person raised their hand and said, in our company, we have more controls over who gets a $40 jacket with our name put across the side of it than we do on who gets an engineer on site for a couple of days that costs us thousands of dollars.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I bet you that is how it normally is for most distributors.
I except for the ones that have embraced the service thing, it's always that case.
But doesn't this come back to measurement and responsibility? Because somebody's got a budget for those jackets, right? And so they may cost you $40, but it's my $40. It's on my budget, right? But that service, nobody's really responsible for it, right? No one's measuring the allocation of that engineer's time or trying to ensure the return on it. They're just an employee that has sort of general responsibility to help the customers. And so you're not trying to regulate their usage because you're not tying any cost back to their usage.
Exactly. And it kind of the whole measurement part, you and I've talked about this, everyone that I come in, what is your process? How do you measure? What do you measure? And sadly, the easiest thing to measure is gross margin. And so you got gross margin, but you don't know which customers are the customers that are making money, which customers are sucking money away from you.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the other thing that I think happens with distributors is you really do value these services when you give them away, right? So simple example from early in many years ago, my Granger career, we had 24-hour emergency service, right? And it was free to everybody. I think most distributors are past that. But at the time, you call this 800 number and they'd reach out to a branch manager, and the branch manager would interrupt his or her weekend and show up and, help you with whatever you needed. And of course, since it was free, a couple things happened. One, it was abused, right? So people would go in for nonsense needs that they could have taken care of at the hardware store. And branch managers started hiding. They wouldn't answer their phones on the weekend because they knew what it was, right? And also there was no value to the service, right? So when we changed it, what we did is we put a fee on it. It was only $50. This was a long time ago. But by putting a fee on it, you could actually now create value that you could then negotiate with major customers. So we would now go to national accounts and we would say, well, Exxon refineries, normally emergency service is $50 a call. We're going to actually give it to you. And by the way, we think you should specify, free emergency service as a requirement in your RFPs for MRO distributors, right? So you begin to use it in negotiating, and you begin to use it as real value you gave away to major customers, and it helped to screen out all the nonsense. Well, take a bigger service like bin replenishment or, tagging or kitting or assembly or whatever. If you put a fee on that, even if you wind up not charging that fee in certain situations, at least you have it as negotiating leverage, and at least you have it as something that you don't have to give away to everybody because you start to put some business rules around it. So even that as a modest step in the right direction strikes me as the right thing to do. What do you think about that, Frank?
Well, you're communicating value. first of all, right?
Yeah, right.
That step is a form of value communication, which is really important. Frank.
And going back to your delivery thing, if a person does not have the authority to throw in an extra $50 because they need it right now, are they really the kind of customer you want to deal with? Does this mean that they just happen to have your number? I've been through that particular situation, but let me give you another fabulous example of having just a nominal fee tied to tied to a service, tied to something you do, and that's an awful lot of distributors do training for their customers. As a matter of fact, I've gone on record as saying that training is the new marketing if you sell a product which requires some expertise tied to it. That there is such a shortage of qualified people that training gets you into places. Well, we've had time after time of distributor clients and friends that we've worked with who do training, and they did it for free. They've done it for free forever. And in my career, going back to the 90s, we did these training sessions, which were valuable, which required lots of logistics. We provided a really nice lunch. We gave a swag bag and all that kind of crap. And in order to get 12 people into the class, we had to sign up 25. We even went so far as to call people the next day and confirm, are you coming? Yes. Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow morning. And we signed up 25 to get 12. We assigned a $50 fee to come to that class. And when we signed up 12 came. As a matter of fact, I had such pushback from salespeople, and this kind of ties to the who is the most adamant against charging anything for anything, and it's salespeople. When salespeople, they came and said, we can't do this. It's not right. My customers that come don't want to have to go through the hassle of going to purchasing and getting a purchase order for that $50 and all this kind of crap. So we gave those salespeople, a certain number of free tickets, so that it's $50 for everyone, except, for you, Mr. Salesperson, you have 20 tickets that you can give to someone that you feel strongly enough about that you can't. The next year, of the people that did not show, 100% of them were people that had free tickets, as opposed to the people that paid the 30, 50, whatever dollars we charge.
So they just didn't see any value in it if it was free.
Exactly. And I have to say that charging a nominal fee, it is like the first step in moving to charging what a real piece of training should be worth. And you can't charge people to come to a sales seminar, but if you're providing real live usable information, whether it be on something like lift safety or arc flash safety or any of 100 other topics, or the National Electric Code, if you're doing that for free, you're being taken advantage of.
Yeah. So in your book, you have I mean, first of all, you write really well, right? So it's interesting.
Well, thank you. For an engineer to write right is a thing, I'll tell you.
Well, it's clever, but at one point you talk about how fee-based service providers are thought of differently, right? So you reclassify how the customer thinks of you if you're actually charging for services rather than giving them away. And the example you give is that, hey, you get this highly paid salesperson in the lobby while the copy machine repairman is shepherded straight into the building to solve a problem, right? And so, you're not putting down copy machine repair people, but the reality is a lot of what your account managers can do is of a greater degree of importance. But since the distributor is limiting how the salesperson is defined, rather than making them this consultative seller or this value-added services provider. The customer just perceives them as the salesperson, not as a solution seller. And it's hard to change that equation if you're not charging for services. Is that the sort of the point?
I would say absolutely. When people pay you to do something, that it elevates you from just being another drive-by salesperson to being a real live expert. And that copy machine guy, I'm guessing that the person that was selling those copy machines, who may even know more about the copy machine than the service guy, probably joined you in cooling your heels out in the lobby. And another point, well, we'll throw this in. That copy machine guy is probably, no, this is old data, 7 or 8 years ago data. That copy machine guy is charging $105 an hour with a minimum of an hour, and most of them spend about 15 minutes servicing a copy machine. So that says something about distributors who go, oh, I'm going to charge for services and I'll charge $50 an hour. No, rethink that.
Right. So what services do you see? I mean, I know it varies based on the vertical, but if you're a distributor and you're giving away a lot of services right now, Frank, where can you start? I mean, what are things, how do you start moving towards monetization in terms of which services you choose and how you manage the internal change so that people understand the importance of it, and what incentives do you provide for your customers or your employees? I mean, how do you get rolling in this?
When I work with people, I believe that the easiest and first thing to start charging for is if you do training. I am massive on training. If you read the magazines that our customers read, you will discover article after article after article where business unit managers, plant managers, facility managers, the people that make things run, or in contractors, the people who are actually overseeing the workers, the comment that all of them say is that we cannot find qualified people, or we have people who would be qualified in 5 years ago technology, but they need something to bring them up. I would say training would be the first thing, because number one, I think it's marketing too, but training would be the first thing. And the approach that you talked about, the approach of saying, okay, let us charge a small amount. Let us open the door. Let us make it so that we can, in fact, use it as a negotiation tool. Let us make it so that it helps us begin to stratify our customers to say, okay, we've got this training, and over here is Acme Anvil Company, and they buy mass quantities of our stuff, and they're not particularly price sensitive, and they buy a quantity that pays for services. Maybe you give it to them. That's great. Maybe you give them and start off by giving them 20 slots, knowing full well that if it's good, they're going to want to send 40 people. That's a great start. The other thing is anything that you do pre-sale, which could be used by your competitors. So this falls into people, if you are, and I'll give this, take a personal example. My wife is, and I live in a 100-year-old house and have an office that's in a 140-year-old house. So my wife is constantly dealing with people that sell new kitchens and new bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. I think she just likes to spend money. But what I've discovered is that the very best of them will say, hey, if I do a layout for you, this layout can be taken to someone else, and then it becomes a parts battle. They charge a certain amount for doing that in a pre-sale way, knowing full well that some people will say, okay, I'm going to buy it from you, and others will then take it to Home Depot or some other big box store and try to duplicate the work. So if you're doing anything like that, that could be lighting layout, it could be piping layout, it could be building materials, for God's sakes. You know, it's just anything. If a person happens to be in the electrical or automation world, there is just so much pre-sale work where we give the customer guidance, we help them develop their specification, we help them figure out exactly what they need. Some smart aleck young purchasing guy gets the proposed bill of materials and gets on the machine and sends it out to 20 other people to get prices. That would be an area where there should be a fee for services. And if you want to, you can always make it so that you involve us in this, we charge you $500. If in the charging $500, we'll knock that off of your bill later on. So that gives you guaranteed margin and margin enhancement. Anything that you do after the sale. I constantly run into distributors who sell products and 5 years later are called by the customer to come out and help them make it work better, solve a problem, do this or that. Should there not be an end in sight? Is it like everything that you sell is guaranteed for as long as you're in business? Well, if things continue, maybe you might not be in business that much longer. So those are the things that I look at, and really in my mind, the question becomes, go through and create a list of the services. Distributors need to do this anyway. They need to say, what do we do for our customer besides just shipping them a brown box every Tuesday? And everything that we do for the customer, aside from shipping them that box, needs to be listed out and then say, okay, how much does this cost? And don't say, no, it's a cost of doing business. No, how much does it cost? Understand what these things cost. Understand what it's costing you. Then the next thing is to determine, does the customer value it? How there's people doing stuff that the customer doesn't even want, like the delivery thing that I talked about. That is that's an issue. If you're providing a service that the customer thinks, I don't know why, but he constantly gives me more stuff than I ask for. I'm not sure that's really a good thing. And finally, after you determine and lay all those out, another point to ask yourself is, if I quit doing this, who will? And everybody says, oh, the competition. Well, not everything. Not everything. Some things, you have customer intimacy, you have knowledge of the customer's operations. Will your competitor really be able to figure it out? And, if it's something as simple as summary billing, well, I think everybody's figured that out by now. If it's something like consolidated packaging, and so that you make one big shipment, most people have figured that out. But we've had instances, and this is like, because it's not all high tech. Some of it's pretty low tech. Yeah, we had instance of a customer that was in a very green part of the country, and they had made the decision that they did not want to have a trail of packaging peanuts and cardboard boxes into their facility. And so they asked major suppliers, would you be willing to put these in these totes that we provide you? Okay. And my client just said, yeah, we'll do that.
Right.
You start thinking about taking stuff out of the box, putting it in the box, hauling those totes, hauling the totes back, reusing them, all of those things. And it was, when I raised the question and then we started exploring, what we found out was my client was the only distributor who was not charging them for that.
Right. So, but this issue of competition, right? So you've got, if you're competing with a bunch of other distributors, and by the way, let me back up. if you're on the call, feel free to send in questions for Frank or for us. We'd be happy to answer them. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. But my question to you, Frank, is how do you change this in an industry where a lot of people are committing the same sin, right? So you've got, I agree with you in some cases, you're the only one willing to put the packing peanuts in the tote. In other cases, other people are going to come in and do these services for free if you don't do them, because the industry has gotten addicted to gross margin as a method of being paid for your value. And this whole area of value-added services has just gotten out of control. So if you're I mean, you don't want to be the first one in town to do this stuff and screw that up and then just lose your business. At the same time, the industry can't forever give away value without, thinking about or working out how to charge for it. So how do you start if you're, one distributor?
If you're concerned about it, all I can say is that, I mean, first of all, a message to all distributors out there: somebody is first in every market. There have been, and I could provide offline, or if someone wanted to talk, I could provide names of people who have made this step. You cannot do it without some forethought. You cannot do it without some planning, but it is possible. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that if you are a good distributor, there are some services that you provide better than your competition. So yeah, the competition can provide a cheap imitation of what you're doing, but can they really do what you're doing? That's the question. You cannot trust your salespeople to tell you that, because understand, services are a crutch for salespeople. It costs them nothing, and it costs the owner of the company everything to provide a lot of these services. So that's a point to think of. Another thing that we have discovered is that if you are someone who provides a service for free, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm providing this for free if and I'm doing as adequate of a job as I need to do. Sometimes it becomes unprofessional and a bit sloppy. If you charge, not only does it change the impression that your customer has of you, but it changes the mindset of the person who's delivering that service, because now they become a professional in delivering that service, as opposed to becoming as opposed to doing, well, I just have to do it, so I'm going to do it. And your services become better. You have extra money to invest in doing it better. You have more money to invest in equipment and resources to drive cost out of providing the service. And I think that's an important factor too, because once you start looking and measuring things, then you start going, well, this is kind of a waste. And finally, I've got one other thing, and I had talked to Jonathan the other day, because one of his neighbors is a friend of mine, Dr. Al Bates, who had developed a chart many years ago that's true in almost every distributor organization. It's called the whale chart. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, let me just toss it out. This chart shows customer and profitability of customer. And if you look at your customers, about 20% of them, a subset of your customers, that equals 20%, provides about 150 of your bottom line. And so if you say, if this 20% provides 150% of your bottom line, what happens to the other? What happens to it? How does it go from 150 down to 100? And the answer is that you've got 20% that provide 100% of your bottom line, 30% who are kind of negative. They could go either way, that, so they're kind of neutral. And then this long tail of people who actually use more services than they pay for. And if you understand who those customers are, the first person that you start applying this to, it is to those people that cost you money.
Right. So you're not making money on them anyway.
You're not making money on them anyway. And quite frankly, it's a good test case, because there's a good chance that they're shopping from shopping your price. There's a good chance that they're cherry picking your product line, that they're figuring out what expertise you do the best in. And
so Frank, we got a couple questions that relate to this. So your discussion just now is about who or whom you give the service to, right?
Yes.
You use the customer stratification, the Texas A&M framework to decide who gets services or at what price they get them. But we have a great question, which is, help me understand how to quantify the approach. Are we referring to the value in the customer's eyes or our cost to serve that customer for that service? I would say both, right? We have to understand the value to the customer as well as our cost of goods, which is something we do well as distributors, but not so well for services, right?
Right. I all of a sudden I got some feedback. Is that coming through to everybody, or is that
you're okay? Keep going.
Okay. The first of all, you need to understand what these services are costing you, because if you truly understand it, you may decide to throttle back on some of those services anyway. If you find out that this service costs you almost nothing, because you've done it through technology, or you've done it electronically, or figured out some other way, then it becomes a moot point. But if you understand what this costs you, then the next point is to say, what is its value to the customer? And the real question becomes, if you don't provide it, who will? If you don't provide it, number one, if you don't provide it, and there's 5 competitors in town that are fully capable of doing it, it's probably not something that you can easily charge for, except for those customers that are costing you money anyway. If it is something that requires the customer to add another person because you're involved in their process and taking care of things, then that's a service that's worth talking about. If you look at it, and I did a research project for AHTD a couple of years ago, I said, for most of the services that those automation electrical people are doing, if they don't do it, the other person that would take on the task charges for it. So we are, in essence, giving away things that if the customer didn't get it from us, they'd pay for. And so you have to figure out, okay, what are the people charging? And this kind of goes back to that. We talked about the copy machine guy getting paid $105 an hour. I constantly talk to distributors and say, well, we're starting to charge for services, and we're sending out our lighting specialist, or we're sending out this person who's a product specialist or an engineer, an applications guy. We're sending them out there, and I go, okay, how much are you charging? And they go, well, we were trying to break in. We wanted to $50 an hour. I go, okay, I'm glad you're charging something. However, do you know what things cost in the real world? So we'll go out and find out. If you take your bike to have it fixed, not a motorcycle, a bicycle, you take that out to the local bike shop in Davenport, Iowa. The going rate is $80 an hour for one of their bicycle technicians. If you take your car to the Ford garage, it's $130 an hour. You go down the list and say, people have forgotten how much things cost and how much other people are charging for services. And so you need to be realistic. You can't charge the sky. But it's usually higher amount to charge than the average distributor thinks.
And I would also add, in response to this, Todd, that you might be able to find things that your customers don't do frequently. They do infrequently, but in aggregate, it's something that if you did it, you could provide an efficiency for them, right? So maybe it's something related to cable cutting or wire cutting. It costs money to have the equipment to do that. A small electrical contractor might not have the resources to go buy the capital equipment for that. But in aggregate, you're going to have a big opportunity because you're probably more efficient at doing it. You have the equipment, and that's going to be a value add for your customers. So those kinds of things where they do infrequently, where you can get scale, tend to be good opportunities. Frank, we had another really good question, a little bit open-ended. We are a food service distributor. We supply restaurants with groceries. We don't offer much in the way of value-added services. Any suggestions for us? So this is coming really more from the non-durable goods side of the world, right?
Hey, I love that. When I wrote my book on distributor specialists, I spoke to several people in that industry, and I was enthralled. Here's the thing that I found. A lot of the things that the people in that distribution sector do are exactly the same as what we do. The only difference is the services provided are similar. For instance, if a lot of people in that industry help the restaurant operator to develop menu items. Okay, if you develop menu items, is that something that's worth value? I think it might be. If you come up with a signature dessert, because that's where the real margin is for those guys, is that something of value? If you come to them with a plan and say, okay, you're getting deliveries twice a week, and because they're twice a week, you've got to over order on the celery that comes with the chicken wings that I like so much. If you guys can't tell from the resemblance, if you're providing something like that, where you go, we can figure out a way to eliminate waste for you. Is that something of value? I believe that all of those are points that are of value. Now, if you're just delivering their groceries, and not providing any of those things, it might be more difficult. But what I found is that a lot of people are doing that menu management, the elimination of waste, how do you serve more food with less kitchen staff? All of those things, have value to the customer, and I believe in some ways you should be paid for it. If you do training on some new food standard or some new restaurant rules that impact restaurants, I think that training could be something you charge for. If you're doing something on COVID and saying, okay, how do we come out of COVID in a way where you don't really understand, what your crowd source is going to look like once you do away with the table being blocked off and government officials telling you have to cut a little hole in your mask and eat through the crack in the mask. Whatever you can do that way is training that could be charged for, in my opinion. Hope that answered the question. I like talking about that for that industry, it especially this close to lunchtime.
There's a company in our backyard here, Frank, Mile High Specialty Foods, and they have the contract for McDonald's for like 14 states around. They got that back in the late 50s. And when I say the contract, I mean everything from napkins to food to stuff to make burgers. These guys also have the largest bakery you've ever seen. They make 2 million buns for McDonald's every week. I've never seen a larger bakery in my entire life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
that is neat. I'll tell you something that that also, I mean, there's some value, and this kind of maybe goes back to my first book on product specialists and all the research that I did, which incidentally I interviewed 400 and some distributors for that book, because I was trying to understand how things worked outside of my native environment, and here was a topic that has come to heart because my daughter-in-law owns a restaurant, and that is that in the restaurant business, someone working in the restaurant for more than 2 years would be the same as a 20-year employee in our business. A lot of these food people have come to the realization that if they work with the chef, there is a good chance in 18 months that chef will move on and they'll be starting from scratch. And a lot of them have started applying and driving their value and driving the services that they provide, not to the chef, but to the owner of the restaurant, so that the relationship is not just with one person who's likely to transfer, but with the person who's going to be there for the long haul. And again, I believe that that's tied to services and tied to a lot of things that could be monetized.
Great. And then we have one more question before we wrap up. Frank, would you charge for VMI? And if so, how would you value it?
If you said VMI?
Yes.
I think that one of the things that I personally ran into with vendor managed inventory is the fact that customers often, for lack of a better word, will say lie about their usage. And so they lure you into these kinds of deals to say, I use $100,000 worth of your kind of stuff, and I'm going to give this to you if you come in and manage the inventory. And then what you discover is, no, they really only use 60,000. So I think that there would be some value in setting some metrics to say, okay, if you use less than you said, we're going to have to charge you for some things. I think that one of the areas that could be a charge for is if you, and not could be, because I've got clients that are doing this, and say, okay, if you buy something and it fails under warranty, in the past, before we managed your inventory, there was a good chance it was just simply thrown away and a new one bought. We will handle warranties, but we charge this much per warranty handle. If we have to make emergency shipments because of something that is not tied to our vendor management, but tied to something on your side, then we are going to have to charge. And then also, if there are reports that are called for, I think that those are an area that should be defined, because anytime you do a service, what you want to do is you want to define the scope. So if you say, we will provide you this kind of report twice a year, and all of a sudden the customer feels like, well, we sure are running through a lot of batteries during the Christmas season. We want to put something else in place during that season to make sure that all those toys with batteries not included don't include batteries from us. That would be something that you would talk about charging for.
Great. Okay, good. So it's been great talking with you today, Frank. Thank you so much for joining us. This is his background, and on the bottom right, you can see the book that we've been discussing primarily, which is the Distributor's Fee-Based Services Manifesto. I bought this on Amazon. I recommend that you do as well. I think, Frank, you've really provided great leadership for the industry and understanding why it's essential to begin charging for some of these services, and some good suggestions about how to get started. I know you said this was a book on why, not how, but there's some good how-to advice that comes from you as well. So thank you very much for that. I hope you'll join us on May 12th. We'll have Peter Newberger on creating value add in a commoditized industry. Peter's an experienced distribution executive. He's run more than one distributor, and he invests in them as well sometimes as part of a PE group. I believe that's right, isn't it, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, he's an absolutely riveting entrepreneur, I would say. We're gonna have a good session.
Good. He's an entrepreneur in the riveting industry, is what I took away from that. Just kidding. And then
and Dribbits as well, as far as I know.
Oh, got it. Okay, good. And then on May 19th, we are covering pandemic effects for distributors. This is in partnership with the NAW. We have a survey out now about how work from home and digital channels and competition, et cetera, how these forces changed and impacted you and your business throughout COVID. So we hope you'll join us then for that. On the right-hand side, you can reach Frank at riverheightsconsulting.com. My contact information is up there as well as Jonathan's, but you can always find us at distributionstrategy.com. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Frank, my friend, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. It's great talking to you. Can't wait for the next time soon.
Hey, it was fun. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.